Welcome to MacStories Unwind. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Vitici. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing really well. You know, it's that time of the year. People may think holidays. I don't mean holidays. It's the end of the year.
Yes.
And that means it's time for our annual Best of the Year picks. We've got a few of these episodes lined up, and we are starting, as we always do, or at least as we did last year, with music, because it was a big music year, I think. And going back through this was a lot of fun. I spent more time on this than I expected to, but it's always fun to do because it's the kind of thing you can do as you do other things around the house or write or whatever happens to be.
Yeah, I think it's been a really good year for music. And for me this year was pretty much split in half. Like the first half of the year, I was using Apple Music. And then at some point in the summer, I switched to Spotify. In fact, Sylvia and we both switched to Spotify.
Oh, okay.
And so I was eligible for Spotify Wrapped for 6 months of usage. And so I got my Spotify Wrapped statistics yesterday. And yeah, and I compiled, and you did the same, a list of albums, and I have my album of the year. So I think, as in previous years, we're going to do this round robin style. So why don't you get started, John? What's the first music album you want to mention?
I want to start with The Sweater Club by Jelani Arya, which is just an absolutely amazing album. It's very hard to describe. Arya is Filipino, African-American, and Chinese. Kind of comes from those three different influences in terms of music styles too. And there's some great tracks on here. I'm in Love and Shudder are probably my two absolute favorites. It's very it's very tempo driven, very upbeat, and has a tiny bit of maybe of a Cure vibe to it, like an old school 80s Love Cats kind of Cure vibe, that kind of fast, fun pace. And I was not aware of Arya's work before this, but this album is just like front to back, one of my absolute favorites of the year. So that's the one I want to start with.
All right. I am going to start with, and I think this is a pick we have in common, Forever by Charlie Bliss.
Yes.
Yeah, so this one, Charlie Bliss, I believe it's their third album. They're an indie rock, indie pop band from New York, from Brooklyn, I want to say. Mm-hmm. I was already familiar with their like I was really into the first album a few years ago, and this I didn't listen to a lot of Charlie Bliss for the past couple of years, but this new album Forever, it really got me. I think of Charlie Bliss, especially like sonically speaking on this album, as like a more indie rock Churches in a way, like it's that sort of style, and it's a very. What I appreciate about this album is that it's a very upbeat, like musically speaking and sonically speaking, it's a very upbeat, very catchy album. But some of the lyrics are kind of sad. They talk about relationships. They talk about growing old and failing to meet your expectations as you're growing older. And so I like that contrast. I like the contrast between lyrics that say one thing but the music that sounds like another thing, and somehow they work really well together. Some of the highlights from the album for me would be Calling You Out, 19,
very good.
19, I'm Not Dead, which has been stuck in my head for the past few months, and also How Do You Do It. These are the highlights on the record for me. And,
same. I'm Not Dead is one of my favorites too. I also like Tragic and Here Comes the Darkness an awful lot too. It's this album for me, it is in my top 5 too. I love the slow burn of a lot of these songs that start out kind of slow and quieter, but really build up to a ton of energy, a lot of guitar, a lot of great energy on these tracks. And you and I have both kind of been following Charlie Bliss since their first album, I believe, but there've been some pretty big gaps in between albums. So I'm kind of like you. I hadn't listened to a lot of Charlie Bliss for quite a while. And then this album just kind of came out of left field. I didn't realize it was coming, and I really loved it.
Yeah.
All right, Federico, let me pick another one that this one we don't have in our top 5 in common, but since I mentioned The Cure already, let's talk a little bit about Songs of a Lost World.
Yes, this is in my honorable mentions. If only because it came out just a short while ago. So I have listened to the album a lot, but not as much as the other albums. In fact, it was not even considered in my Spotify Wrapped.
Yeah, it was. That's very true of me too. I mean, this album only came out, like maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, something like that. And I haven't spent a ton of time on it, but I ended up putting it in my top 5, partly because it's just a very John vibe. I mean, The Cure is a group that for me dates back to the earliest days when they were first making music. I mean, I was a Cure fan when I was in high school in the 80s. So it's,
Wow.
I've been listening to Cure.
Okay.
I've been listening to Cure since the very first singles on vinyl. Okay. I mean, The Cure is one of those bands, along with REM and U2 and some others, that have kind of been along for the ride my entire music life. And the thing about The Cure is, they hadn't had anything for quite a while that was really notable, and this album is just beautiful from the beginning to the end.
Yes.
It starts with Alone, it ends with End Song, and there's just this incredible orchestration, lots of long instrumental parts in these songs that then kind of crescendo to Robert Smith singing, and it's just a fantastic record, kind of front to back.
Yeah, strong disintegration vibes on this album. And it just there are some really standout lyrics in this record, and just I think we gotta appreciate just how well Robert Smith's voice has aged with time. Like,
yes.
I think it's really astounding. Like, it sounds so good, and coming out after, what is it, like 15 years or something without an album, and just to come back with Songs of a Lost World, what an accomplishment and what a career. Just incredible.
It's been more than 40 years since The Cure's first album. I mean, it's a really long career, and this is just like, to have this come out after so many years is just a real treat for me, and I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah. I want to mention something that surprised me, and that is Moon Music by Coldplay. Now, I used to be really into Coldplay, were the first 4 albums, up until, I want to say, Viva La Vida, probably, like a lot of people. Like, I was really into, like, I actually really liked X and Y, which is their 3rd album, I want to say. And then I kind of dropped off as Coldplay sort of started exploring the more electronic, mainstream pop angle, and they became this incredibly huge stadium acts, and like, I know that going to a Coldplay concert is an experience, but musically speaking, those albums, like that whole era, didn't really resonate with me. And this Moon Music album, which is their 3rd album in the Music of the Spheres sort of trilogy, I don't know, I really liked it. It feels like they're still going after that sort of pop, dance, synth sort of style, but there are some, I don't know, they feel more like a cohesive band again. And so there are, Feels Like I'm Falling in Love, I Am a Mountain, the song that is called Rainbow, but the official title of the song is the Rainbow Emoji. It's just that, that's the name of the song. That's a really good one. And also, like, I've listened to We Pray so much this year, because that song, you probably heard of it on the radio, like, it's a really good single. So I don't know, I have definitely listened to Coldplay a lot more this year than I would have thought if you asked me a few months ago, and the fact that so many of their songs ended up in my Spotify Wrapped says something. I think a lot of people sort of rediscovered their appreciation for Coldplay with this record. And if you haven't listened to Coldplay in a while, do not expect like a return to the days of Parachutes or a rush of cold blood to the head. It's not that, but it's better than what you may think, judging from Coldplay's most recent outings.
All right. That's an album that I haven't listened to much. I think I only listened to it like once, so I'm going to have to check it out again and see what I think of it. I want to shout out to Brat by Charlie XCX.
Of course, yes.
I know you have this in your honorable mentions, and I really enjoyed this album. I've been a Charlie XCX fan since, I guess, right around the time of the pandemic. She did a really great album during the pandemic and had some great singles before that as well. But this album has just got so much energy, and it's like pure Charlie club music with great singles like 360 and 365, which are the opening and closing tracks. Von Dutch, which was the very first single that came out before the album was officially out. And then there are lots of good remixes that have come out since then. I mean, she's really been working it with the collaborations and the remixes and all the other singles that have spun off of the main album. And one that's really good with Lorde is "Girls So Confusing," which is another really good track as well. I've enjoyed this one a lot.
Yeah, let's see, because now I'm approaching album of the year territory. But before we get to that, I will mention Linkin Park From Zero. This is the comeback album of Linkin Park with a new singer, Emily Armstrong, following the tragic passing of Chester Bennington a few years ago. For many years, just like other people, I couldn't bring myself to listen to Linkin Park because it was just too sad. And that has changed over the past year. I sort of started listening to their older albums again. But with this new record and with this new singer, this new lineup, new drummer, new singer, I don't know, it feels like Linkin Park has the energy again. And this album is more than fan service. I saw that as an accusation that a lot of people levied against this record. I think it's way more than fan service. You can hear, you can feel that the band is having fun again. There's The Emptiness Machine, of course, is the single that came out when they announced the new singer and the new lineup. But there have been other really good singles on this album. Heavy is the Crown, I've listened to a lot this year. Over Each Other, and they are treading familiar territory. Like, they sound like Linkin Park, but also Emily Armstrong. She's definitely different from Chester, and she's got a different range. She's got a different style. She's got a different stage presence. And so I hope to be able to go see them live someday. The concerts look really fun, and they're playing the old songs in addition to the new album. I didn't have a lot of expectations for From Zero. I feared that it was going to be, like I said, fan service or like a commercial thing, but they got the juice again. And so I hope to see them live at some point.
Yeah, that would be really great. I mean, have you heard whether they're coming to Europe at all?
I haven't checked the dates lately.
Yeah. Well, that would be great. I mean, that's a band that's right in your sweet spot in terms of eras too, I suppose, right? I mean, with very much a 90s band, I guess. Not a band that I've ever really listened to much, but definitely nice to see them back and have a new singer. I want to mention No Shame, No Fame by Kindsight. Kindsight has kind of a classic jangle pop feel to it, which reminds me a little bit of like the Ravenettes, if you've ever heard them, or some of the jangly 80s, 90s music that you would hear from bands like REM, for instance. Love You All the Time is a single that I think I mentioned on this episode last year because they started releasing singles at the end of 2023, but the entire album is really fantastic. And if you like that kind of classic alternative jangle pop sound that's upbeat and fun, this is a great album. One of the songs I like the most, besides the one I just mentioned, is Acid Island 45. So go check that one out too.
My next pick, let's see, let me check out my list. Actually, before I get to that, 2 honorable mentions. F1 Trillion by Post Malone. I picked this one before on Unwind. It's Post Malone going country in a surprisingly cohesive and genuine way.
He's on my honorable mentions too.
Yeah, a really good record. Teamed up with a lot of like legit country singers and artists and musicians. So that's been on that's in my honorable mentions, as well as No Name by Jack White. I don't usually listen to a lot of Jack White, but No Name, that's the name of the album, is just a fun, easy rock album that goes down like a really, really nice glass of ice water in the summer. Like, it's just, it goes down so easy, so many incredible guitar riffs. It's just No Name by Jack White. But my next pick will be Posthuman Next Gen by Bring Me the Horizon. I think I mentioned this one before. I
think you might have.
Yeah, this is straight up like emo metal core by Bring Me the Horizon. It's a very specific type of music in terms of like Bring Me the Horizon try to combine so many different genres together, from dubstep to electronic music to emo-core, metalcore, punk hardcore, post-punk, like everything blended together in this very unique mix that you gotta be into it. There's a lot of screamo in it. There's a lot of like heavy guitars. It's a taste.
It's a whole thing for sure.
It's a whole thing. But I will just say that Utopia is my second song of the year. I'll get to my album and my song of the year in a minute. But also I really like, and also go watch the video for Top 10 Statues That Cried Blood. That's the name of the song. Yes. So Posthumous Next Giant by Bring Me the Horizon.
All right. Well, I share your love for Jack White, I guess. Although I'm kind of the same way. Like, Jack White sometimes makes albums that I don't like very much. It really kind of blows hot and cold, but I really respect his skill as a guitarist and love a lot of the White Stripes stuff that's out there. And I haven't listened to this album a lot, but I've heard a couple of singles and it's really good. So it's kind of on my list of things to dig in a little deeper. My last two honorable mentions that I want to mention are two bands that are kind of at the core of the kind of alternative music I love. One is Cage the Elephant. They had Neon Pill come out this year, and they haven't done anything in a little while. Not at least it hadn't seemed like there hasn't been all that much lately. And Metaverse and Neon Pill are a couple singles on there. Very classic Cage the Elephant sound to this album. Definitely worth checking out. Maybe not my favorite Cage the Elephant album. Definitely not my favorite, but it really kind of is up there in terms of the quality. I also have really enjoyed Pickup Full of Pink Carnations by the Vaccines. You know, the Vaccines have had a pretty rocky career, I think. Like, they started out strong, and then they had an album or two that weren't all that great. This one is a little bit of a return to form. So if you liked some of the early Vaccines music, I suggest checking out Pickup Full of Pink Carnations, because it's a hard title to say for some reason, because it's not really a sentence, but it's a good album. So that's what I'm going with.
All right, it's time for my final pick. That is also my album of the year. That also contains my song of the year. My album of the year is All Hell by Los Campesinos. This is such an incredible indie rock, emo rock album. Los Campesinos, they've been around for a while. They've been around for the past 15 years. They had a much different sound all the way back in 2007 when I think I first heard of them. This is an album that, and I guess, having done some research on Los Campesinos in recent years, because, I kind of dropped off, I haven't listened to them in a while. And then just this album hit me so hard. The lyricism in this album, the themes, the really complex and sometimes strange lyrics that paint these very specific images in terms of love and loss and relationships and caring for someone in the face of adversity, in the face of politicians and governments that maybe don't care about your well-being. It's the kind of album that makes me think about it when I'm not listening to it, about some of the sentences, about some of the turns of phrases and the lyrics. And just the music is incredible if you are into that sort of genre. Like, my song of the year is Feast of Tongues. It's an incredible track that talks about caring for someone despite difficult circumstances around you and being able to protect someone you love despite everything going to hell around you. And there are other highlights in this record: Long Throws, The Order of the Seasons, 0898 Heartache. But there isn't really a bad song on this album, and I've listened to it dozens of times. It made me reevaluate the entire back catalog of Los Campesinos. And if you haven't listened to this band and you have some time, start with the first album and then progressively work your way through All Hell. I wish, just go listen to the record, check out the lyrics. this is what like most of these albums that I've mentioned here, you probably can just enjoy them without paying too much attention to the lyrics. Here, I think it's worth reading the lyrics, trying to understand the different metaphors, the multiple references. It's a very dense album from a lyrical perspective, and musically speaking, it's just it's my sort of stuff. So yeah, All Hell by Los Campesinos. It's my album of the year, with Feast of Tongues being my song of the year.
All right, though, that's great. I didn't know we were going to hold the album of the year till the end, so I already mentioned mine, Federico. I'm going to go with The Sweater Club by Jelani Arya, okay? And if I had to pick a song, I would pick Shudder on the same album, because Shudder is just one of those songs that worms its way into my brain, and I hear it as I walk down the street day after day after day, in the best way possible. I mean, I have not gotten tired of that song. This was an interesting music year for me. I didn't explore, I think, quite as much as I would have liked to, especially when I look back at my Apple Music replay. And I don't know what's going on there. I had a lot of songs that I listened to once and never revisited. Maybe that's because Apple Music doesn't resurface that stuff super well. But The Sweater Club is an album that I've discovered very, very early in the year and listened to and returned to all throughout the year. So that's my album of the year.
All right. I think we did it.
We did. That was a good quick rundown. I thought I was a little concerned we might be here half the afternoon, but you know what? I think we did a good job.
After all these years, we learned how to do it.
We have figured that out. That's for sure. And you know what we should do, Federico? Why don't you, if you need to, revise your list, because I want to put at least a few tracks of each of these on our MacStories Unwind Apple Music playlist that we haven't really kept up with that well this year. But I'd like to include some of these songs on that, and maybe, I don't know, maybe even you could put together a Spotify one. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah. We'll see. But we should do that. And next week we will be doing movies and TV shows. So we'll be doing that, and we're gonna wrap things up at the end before the holidays with video games. So that's kind of the plan over the next couple of weeks. You can find both of us over at MacStories.net. We are on social media seemingly everywhere, but you can always count on finding Federico as @Viticci. That's VITICCI, and me as @John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHEES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.